Now we'll be doing Oklahoma State. So first I'll talk a little bit about their head coach, Mike Gundy, and then I'll talk some about their roster, and then I'll go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So after the way the 2022 season ended, and after the way the 2023 season began, it really looked like Mike Gundy's time at Oklahoma State was coming close to an end. Because, in 2021, they had a 12-win season where they just missed out on the college football playoff. And then in 2022, they started off really good, but then lost like five of their last six games and finished at 7-6. And then in 2023, they started off 2-2 with a blowout loss to South Alabama, but then he got it turned around and they won eight of their last 10 games. And now they have 85% of their production coming back from last season. So they're expected to be a team that goes to the college football playoff this year. And Mike Gundy is a very good coach at player development and game planning and uh, game time coaching, but he is limited to what he can do as a coach because of recruiting. Now, it would be hard for Oklahoma State to have the kind of recruiting classes that Oklahoma and Texas A&M do, uh, because those places take most of the good players from the state of Texas. But Oklahoma State this year finished 56th in recruiting, and then the year before that, they finished 55th in recruiting, which is really bad. And I do think that it would be possible to do much better than that there. So I just don't really think that Mike Gundy is that good of a recruiter. And to me, that is a big part of being a good coach. Of course, development of players and then the game time coaching and game planning are big parts too. But getting talent is a very important thing also. And he's one of those coaches that really gets a lot out of a little. But the Vegas win total for Oklahoma State this season is only at 7.5, and I think that is ridiculously low. Now I know you can't win 7.5 games, but that means that they're expected to either go at 7-5 or 8-4. And with all Oklahoma State has coming back and the coach that they have, and how well they did last season, if they go any worse than 9-3 this season, it's going to be a huge disappointment in my opinion. But I thought I should just mention that because Vegas is right on that kind of stuff a whole lot. So I'm not going to say that there's no way that they could be right about that. But I think they're going to be wrong. So now, starting on the roster on the offensive side, so Alan Bowman comes back at quarterback, and he was pretty good for them last year. I think it's good news that he's back. He wasn't great though. His completion percentage was 60.7%, which was not great. And then his throwing average of yards per throw was not that good, at 6.9. And he did throw 14 interceptions, which was not good, and only 15 touchdown passes. So only one more touchdown pass than interceptions, which wasn't good. But he did have a lot of yards, 3,460 last season. Uh, and then at wide receiver, they've got several really good options here for him to throw to. They returned two starting wide receivers. They've got Brennan Presley, who led the country in catches last season with 101, and he had nearly 1,000 yards last season at 991, and also had six touchdowns. And then they've got Rashad Owens coming back, who didn't become a starter until the fifth game, but started the last 10 games and still ended up with 63 catches for 895 and five touchdowns, averaging 14.2 a catch. And he had 3 games last year of over 100 receiving yards. And they've got Deshaun Stripling, who transferred to Oklahoma State last season, but didn't play much because of an injury. But he came from Washington State, and there in 2022 had 51 catches for 602 and 5 touchdowns, averaging 11.8 a catch. So the receiving unit is not real deep in my opinion, but the starters are great. And then at running back, of course, with the starting running back, they couldn't be in better shape. They've got the best running back in the country, Ollie Gordon, who actually today got arrested for driving drunk. I don't know if that'll have any effect on his playing time this season, but if not, they're going to be in great shape because he's one of those running backs like in the past that you don't really see much anymore. A really tough runner who has an unlimited number of carries in a game. He'll probably get 25 carries a game this season. And he didn't play much in the first 3 games last season, but in the last 11 games, he had 1,623 yards and uh, he had 19 touchdowns and averaged 6.1 a carry on 266 carries. I think he'll probably be a 2,000-yard rusher this season. There's a good chance that that would get him the Heisman Trophy. And then depth behind Gordon was a problem for Oklahoma State last year, but I think they've probably fixed that, bringing in a four-star running back transfer from Arkansas, AJ Green. He has there in 3 years combined on 201 carries, 951 yards, and 6 touchdowns, averaging 4.7 a carry. But I would expect that yard per carry average for him to go up this year with an offensive line like Oklahoma State's. Their offensive line is so deep this year, and it's very good. They've got nearly 2 full lines of starting experience coming back. All 5 starters from last season are back. They've got uh, tackles Dalton Cooper and Jake Springfield coming back. Cooper only allowed 3 sacks and 22 total pressures last season, and Springfield only allowed 13 total pressures and 1 sack last season. And they've got guards Jason Brooks and Preston Wilson coming back. Brooks only played 8 games, but only allowed 13 pressures and 3 sacks in that. And then Wilson only allowed 8 pressures and didn't allow any sacks all season. And then they've got a really good center coming back, Joe Michalski, who only allowed 8 pressures and didn't allow any sacks last season. So this offense is going to be very balanced, and I think one of the best in college football this year, probably the best offense in the Big 12. Now moving on to the defensive side, this isn't as good. They weren't very good here overall last year. They allowed on average at 26.7 points per game, and their defense allowed 441.8 total yards per game, which was 122nd. Uh, and their defensive line was a big part of the struggles last year for them defensively. Their defensive line was horrible, and they didn't have much of a pass rush last year. They need to get more of a pass rush. Now, everybody on the defensive line is back from last season, and you can take that one of 2 ways. One way is that it's a good thing to have all that experience coming back, and they should be better then now that they're more experienced. And then another way is it's bad that they're coming back, and it'd be better if they would have just left because they weren't any good anyway. But because of the defensive line, Oklahoma State really struggled to stop the run last year. They ranked at 96th in stopping the run. But their linebackers are really good. They may have the best group of linebackers in the Big 12. They've got Nicholas Martin coming back, who led the Big 12 in tackles last season with 140. He's one of the best linebackers in college football. And he also had 19 total pressures and six sacks and two interceptions and a forced fumble and fumble recovery last season. And they also have Colin Oliver, who had 73 tackles and 38 total pressures and six sacks and five pass breakups and four forced fumbles and a fumble recovery last season. And then they've got Justin Wright, who didn't play much last year. He transferred in from Tulsa, but he was injured last season. But at Tulsa in 2022, he had 101 tackles and two sacks and two interceptions and 20 total pressures and three pass breakups and two fumble recoveries and a forced fumble. And then in the secondary, they were overall horrible here last year. They ranked 123rd against the pass, giving up 275 passing yards a game. That's going to have to improve for them to be able to win a playoff game. They could possibly win the Big 12 this year, even if their defense is the same, though. So it was really the cornerbacks that were bad last year. Oklahoma State has a really good group of safeties, but the cornerbacks were awful. Now they're back from last season, and like with the defensive line, you can take that one of two ways. But they do have three really good safeties coming back. They've got Kendall Daniels, who had 105 tackles and two sacks, two interceptions, and two fumble recoveries, and a fourth fumble and a pass breakup last season. And they've got Trey Rucker, who had 100 tackles and an interception and a pass breakup, and two fumble recoveries and a forced fumble last season. And they've also got Cameron Epps, who had last season 40 tackles and three interceptions, one for a touchdown, and four pass breakups. So on special teams, they do look okay here. Uh, but now I'll be moving on to the predictions. So Oklahoma State starts the year against South Dakota State, who was actually the best team in the FCS last season. And I know Oklahoma State got blown out by South Alabama last year, so could they lose this game? Of course, it is possible. Almost anything is possible in college football, but there's no way that I could predict that. So I think they win easily. So then they play Arkansas at home. I think this will be a pretty close game. So Arkansas, I think, can run some on Oklahoma State in this game and take advantage of that weak defensive line of theirs and score quite a few points. But Arkansas does have some good players in the secondary. They've got a good group of safeties and they've got one good cornerback. But uh, even if you do have one weak player in the secondary like Arkansas does. A team like Oklahoma State that's good at throwing the football can take advantage of that and throw to their spot. And I think they'll probably do that in this game. And even if Arkansas slows down Oklahoma State's passing a little bit, Oklahoma State is so balanced on offense that they can just use Ollie Gordon to get them a lot of points in this game, running a whole bunch. So it really comes down to coaching, though. I know Arkansas has recruited better than Oklahoma State, but Gundy's a much better coach than Pittman, and I think they win this one by around a touchdown. So then they play on the road at Tulsa. Should be a pretty easy win. So then they have the big game at home against Utah. So Utah, I think, can take advantage of Oklahoma State's defensive weaknesses because they've got a nice group of running backs and a good offensive line and a good quarterback. I think they'll score a lot of points in this game. But Oklahoma State's offense is better, I think, than Utah's is, and Utah's got a better defense, but I do think that they're still going to struggle to stop a balanced and really good offense like Oklahoma State. I still think Oklahoma State will score a lot in this game. And these two teams are so even that it really comes down to home field advantage for me. And Oklahoma State's defense probably won't be that good overall this year, but I think they'll play better at home and win a really close one. So then on the road at Kansas State, so Kansas State is going to be one of the best rushing teams in the country this year. I think they'll take advantage of Oklahoma State's weak defensive line and run a whole lot on them in this game. Now, Oklahoma State's offense is much more balanced than Kansas State's is. Kansas State isn't going to be great, I don't think, at throwing the ball this year. So I don't really think they can take advantage of Oklahoma State's weak cornerbacks. But Oklahoma State, has weaknesses on defense, and Kansas State doesn't really have a weakness on their defense. They're pretty solid everywhere defensively. Now, I think Oklahoma State is a better team than Kansas State, but this being at Kansas State, I have a feeling that Kansas State's going to win this one. Really close, though. So then they play West Virginia at home. West Virginia, like Kansas State, can take advantage of Oklahoma State's defensive line and run a whole lot, but they're also pretty one-dimensional offensively. And West Virginia also has a pretty solid defense, like Kansas State. But I do think that Oklahoma State is going to score a lot on them still. I think they're going to struggle to slow their offense down, and Oklahoma State's just the better team in my opinion, and they're playing at home, so I think it'll be close, but they'll win. I think. So then they play at BYU, a team that's not going to be very good. It should be a fairly easy win. And then on the road at Baylor. So I know it's hard for teams like this that aren't real talented to win two road games in a row. But the good news is this is BYU and Baylor. Baylor's a team that I don't think is going to be able to take advantage of a team like Oklahoma State that may be kind of tired playing a second road game in a row because Baylor just is not very good. Oklahoma State is much better. Baylor's defense was horrible last year, even worse than Oklahoma State's, and their offense is nowhere close to Oklahoma State, so I think they win. So then they play Arizona State. They should be an easy win. A horrible team. And then on the road at TCU. So I've been back and forth with this one. It's a possible upset game for Oklahoma State. TCU does have a good group of receivers, but I don't really think that they have the running backs and the kind of quarterback to really take advantage big of Oklahoma State's defensive weaknesses. I do think they'll score quite a bit, but I don't think they'll be able to score like every possession in this game. And TCU's defense, I think, will be better this year, but theirs was bad too last year. And I don't think they're going to be able to really slow down much Oklahoma State's offense. So I think Oklahoma State wins a close one. So then they play Texas Tech. Texas Tech is not terrible. This could be a pretty close game. And Oklahoma State is not the kind of team this year that I think is going to be able to just dominate these more average teams like Texas Tech, but they should beat them probably by at least a touchdown. So then they end the season on the road at Colorado. So Colorado is going to be really bad even when they're playing their best this year, but they're not going to be playing their best in this game. This will be Colorado's last game of the season because they'll already be ineligible for a bowl game at this point. And Deion Sanders will be thinking about what he's going to do after this game because he's not going to be the head coach of Colorado anymore after this game. He's going to leave. And of course, he's not really the head coach right now. That's just in name only because he's not really a football coach. But Oklahoma State should win this one easily. And Shador Sanders' mind isn't going to be on this game either. It's going to be on the NFL. Uh, so my final prediction for Oklahoma State is 11-1 overall and 8-1 in the conference. This would put them in the Big 12 championship game. and for sure in the college football playoff, whether if they win it or lose it. But I don't think that they're good enough to beat a really good team in the college football playoff. I don't think they're a possibility to win the national championship because, Oklahoma State's offensive line is going to be good and it'll do well against the Big 12 teams. But like when they played against Texas in the conference championship last season, who had a really good defensive line, their offensive line got dominated by Texas's defensive line, and Ollie Gordon couldn't run. So I think that would probably be what happens if they go against a team like Texas again. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back very soon.